Practice. I'm the Knowledge Management Consultant at KIC's Africa 19 Hub, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you. So I'm just going to share some slides. I hope everyone can see my screen. Again, a very warm welcome to our third community of practice on the realities of competency-based curriculum and education. The third COP will be focused on competency-based learning assessment. On behalf of the organizing team, I'd like to extend our deep and sincere gratitude to those who have joined and have engaged with us on this journey so far. In the past two sessions, we have been able to exchange knowledge, regional innovations, and good practices in implementing learner-centered educational reform. We hope these engagements can continue to utilize and mobilize the collective experience and commitment to strengthen the foundations of educational quality. The African Curriculum Association has also shared some wonderful webinar resources on Google Docs, and I took a screenshot of some of those resources, and that's to the right of your screen. I will be able to share the Google link in the chat box. And we hope that these resources can encourage and sustain conversations amongst participants during and following the sessions. As a kind reminder, partner representatives who attend 5 of the 6 COP workshops will receive digital certificates issued by UNESCO ICPA. The workshop is the third in a series of 6 communities of practice. Our last session of the realities of competency-based curriculum and education will be next Thursday, and will cover monitoring and evaluation, competency-based education. We are excited to also share our upcoming sessions on teaching, learning, and assessing 21st century skills, as well as project management and scaling of innovations. To commence today's session, Jacqueline Onyango of the ACA will invite participants to recap learnings from the previous session on teacher professional development for competency-based education. This will be followed by an exercise on effective formative and summative assessment led by Gertrude Namubiru. Next, we'll be privileged to have Mr. Blessings, Education Research Officer of the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education of Zimbabwe, who will share his country's experience. Subsequently, there will be a question and answer session based on both the ACA's and Zimbabwe's presentations. Maurice Nkuzi of the ACA will then lead an interactive overview of designing and developing a lesson using the complete cycle of the constructive alignment. Finally, Yvonne from KIC's Africa 19 Hub will manage monitoring evaluation. I will now kindly invite Jacqueline Onyango of the ACA to lead the next section. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues and members, participants, good afternoon. We want to just have a brief recap of last week's session. We did have our discussion on teacher professional development for competency-based education. So we just want to run through very fast. Given that we have very few minutes, allow me just to pick out 3 or 4 people. Then if we still have 2 minutes to go, then we shall be able to bring others on the floor. So we just want you to tell us what you learned from the last time, based on the presentations, based on the discussions that we had, and even what you have been able to talk about on Copano, that will help us move the process forward, especially in our own countries. So I want to begin by just calling on Taolane from Lesotho. Are you on board with us? If you could just quickly give us a learning you got.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Taolane from Lesotho. We have learned a lot, really. We learned about competence-based curriculum, and we shared experiences about how our different countries are undertaking it, the challenges that they are facing, and how they try to overcome such challenges. So we are looking forward to learning about assessment of CBC today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who may wish to just put up your hand, even as I look for a few more people. Can we have Adam from Somalia? If you're on board with us. Okay, I don't seem to be seeing a hand. Amaunda from Kenya, if you're on board, kindly, one thing that you've learned from the process last week.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Jacqueline. It's not different from what the previous participant has said. It's about the various ways in which different countries approach the teacher professional development, where we have most of us doing it at national level, but there's also those of us who are doing from the bottom-up approach. And the effects this has had, or the effects each of the methods has on teacher development. And the challenges we have had in each one of them, and the various ways in which those challenges can be overcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe let me just rephrase it a little bit. And this time I want to call upon Crispin as we wait for anybody else to raise their hand. Looking at the model that you are using, what new thing do you think you'll bring on board from the other models that we had discussed? Crispin, you want to share with us? Crispin, I think is from Zimbabwe or Lesotho. Okay, maybe not on board. How about Ethel from Ghana?
Yeah, I'm happy to share.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked, enjoyed the session, especially last week. I also learned a lot from the comments that were coming. I'm yet to share mine, but it will come up. But
Okay.
I realized that most of our countries were, majority of us are using cascade model, and we have in our various countries identified a lot of loopholes. I kind of felt from the meeting last week that school-based teacher continuous professional development is the way to go. But of course, we need to ensure that we are providing all the resources and the support that the school level actors and stakeholders will need to be able to run a very effective, quality and equitable TCPD. And so that's something that came out strongly for me, and I thought it's something that we need to reflect on a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lastly, maybe let's go to Joyce from Uganda. Anything you learned from the case studies? We had several. Joyce, are you with us? Okay, looks like she's not, probably not hearing us. How about Sekosana? South Africa?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. Anything you learned from the case studies we did last week? I think you're muted.
Okay, I was surprised because I'm from Lesotho.
Oh, okay, sorry. Pardon me, I
Okay.
may not, the names are not having all the countries indicated.
Oh, I'm sorry, I will correct that. I've learned that for CBC to be implemented correctly, teacher professional development is very crucial. And if it is not taken care of, the implementation is not going to be what it's supposed to be. Yes, we are using the cascading model, but we have learned that there are some challenges, especially where you'll find that we don't have enough funding and we don't have enough staff, where you will find that only one teacher will be trained, and the expectation will be that that teacher is expected to train other teachers. Therefore, it means that we will have to concentrate more on the school-based workshops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So participants and members, I think it's critical. Every other session we begin, we'll keep recapping because it's important to remind ourselves, and we expect that as we learn from each other, we should be able to improve our systems. So I want to put a close to this session. It was to be a very brief session, and be able to welcome our first presenter for the day, that is Dr. Gertrude Namubiru. Gertrude, are you on board? Please bring up your presentation so that then you can take the floor.
Are you able to see the presentation?
Probably just waiting for it to load in a few minutes. We are yet to see it though. Do you need probably, yeah, it's coming, a little patience. Okay, there we are, so just take over, okay.
Yeah, good afternoon, colleagues. Hello.
Good afternoon, we are listening.
Yeah, you are listening. Yeah, you will excuse me, I may not put on my camera just because where I'm located, the internet connection is poor, and I've been losing the earlier speakers anyway. Yeah, what I'm going to present this afternoon is just a warm-up session, and probably I will talk briefly about effective, formative, and summative assessment for competency-based. For competency-based, identify what constitutes effective competency-based assessment. You may find that the competency-based assessment has little or few changes or few differences from other assessment, which I think we can now deliberate on as we try to link ourselves to today's presentations. I would like members to look at that question: what are the exceptional difference between competency-based assessment and traditional assessment? I would request you to write your answers in the chat, and I would like to request Jacqueline, Felicia, and probably Maurice to take care of the answers provided in the chat. This will help us as we go on to find out how much the participants know about the session and how we can help them. Probably we can put, because of the short time, we can put the answers on the panel, or we can see how to craft the conclusion here in this session. Thank you so much. You can now go to the chat and you write your answers on this. We want to find out what you know about competency-based and what makes it different from the traditional assessment we've been using. Just 2 minutes. Jacqueline, I think you will alert me when they have written something.
Yeah.
Yes, we are taking care.
Yeah, as they. Hello.
Sorry, Gertrude, I shared a link on the chat where people can access a Google Doc document where they can take notes, they can put the answers and so on. Yeah, so that information will be migrated to the portfolio on Copano. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maurice. Members, you can note that competency-based assessment is so critical in the implementation of competency-based curriculum or education, and it requires a balance between formative and summative assessment, if it is to be effective anyway. Yeah, this is just because if it is formative, it can inform us on the feedback which should be given to the students, to the teacher, to the head teacher, and probably to the whole school. And if it is summative, we can use it for decision making. The cumulative information gathered can help us in deciding who should go to the next level and so on. So you will realize that competency-based assessment emphasizes the use of formative assessment at the expense of summative assessment, because we need to continuously gather information on the learning and to ensure that learning improves. It also focuses on the learner's mastery of the content, and that's why we are saying that when we are assessing in competency-based, the focus should be on an individual, not a group of learners, because learners get competent at different times. So if our intention is on mastery, we must make sure that we look at an individual, not a group of learners. And we should also bear in mind that this mastery has no limit time. So it can take a long time, it can take a short time. The competency-based assessment, you will realize also that it emphasizes authentic and alternative assessment to allow students to continue practicing until they become proficient. So many others, because of that time, I will not go through everything, but I would like you to look at this model where we have both formative assessment. And when we look at this model, we want to craft a story on what can make us have an effective assessment, whether summative or formative. Just you can pick and write in the chat, or sorry, on the Google link provided by Maurice. And as I said before, the information you provide may not necessarily help you in this very session, but it may help us later on to enrich the information we put on the panel, because it may be late now to go into all the details and answer all your queries or your concerns. But maybe what I have to say about this model, as you write your answers, is that if we want to be effective in assessing whether summative or formative, we should ask ourselves 4 or 3 questions. Why? What is the purpose of the assessment? And you remember at the beginning of this session, we started with a question. And there was a purpose of asking that question. One of the purpose was, first of all, to find out how much knowledge do you know about today's topic. I also wanted to find out whether there are some misconceptions in the way you look at competency-based. But one could also want to find out whether there are some gaps, learning gaps, which can be addressed. This alone can change the focus of the presentations. If it is the teaching, the focus of the teaching. So another question is when, as we plan to come up with an effective assessment, we should ask ourselves, when should I assess? We should assess timely. If it is formative, should I assess before the lesson? Should I assess during the lesson? Should I assess at the end of the lesson? When should I assess these learners so that I get the best out of what I want? I mean, out of what the learners have. So if it is summative, again, it has also to be timely. Maybe at the end of the instruction, at the end of the unit, at the end of the program. So we should plan and time and assess at an appropriate time. Another question could be how. So we should ensure that when we want to assess effectively, we must define and articulate competencies in relation to learning objectives. They should not be isolated from the learning objectives. We should also create an assessment rubric to guide us on which competencies to assess and which to leave out. We should craft the learning experiences to suit the competencies already set in the assessment rubric. And the competency-based assessment requires us so much to document whatever level we reach, whatever level we assess. We should make sure that we document so that this information is used later on, maybe during the summative assessment, as we design the rubric, to design clear, effective questions, to plan and execute, and also to ensure that we don't repeat what we have asked during the formative assessment. So, as I conclude, we should ensure that effective summative assessments should not be repeats for formative tasks, but should require students to use their sources acquired through formative assessment and generalize and be able to apply in any situation required. Yeah, thank you very much. More details will be given on the panel. Let me hope I have used my time effectively. Jacqueline, you are muted.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't noted that. Thank you very much for that elaborate presentation. Members, we have a short opportunity to ask a few questions, but that will come to us a little later. Allow us to have the presentation from Zimbabwe. And so at this point, I would like to invite Mr. Blessing, who is from the Education Research Officer, to make his presentation on the Zimbabwe experience on the competency-based assessment. Mr. Blessing, are you ready?
I'm ready, just waiting for space to upload my presentation. Dr. Gertrude could exit his presentation.
Gertrude, kindly exit your presentation to allow Mr. Blessing to present. Thank you. So participants, let's just be a little patient as he loads on, but let's prepare with our questions. We'll have a chance to ask those questions.
I just find out, is my presentation now on?
Yes, it is now on, so kindly proceed.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Hello to everyone. My name is Tabikwa Blessing from the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education in Zimbabwe. I'm also a member of the ACA. I will be presenting on our experiences as a country in competence-based curriculum, but my focus will be on the assessment for competence-based education. So, as a country in 2017, we introduced what we call the new curriculum framework, but we codenamed it the competence-based curriculum because of the emphasis on the competence development. So just give you some key elements of this competence-based curriculum so that we'll be able to link it when I'll be talking on assessment. How is it related in the what have we done? So among other aims of the competence-based curriculum that we developed, we wanted to develop a curriculum that will help to develop a national identity in our learners, a curriculum that will prepare learners for life and work and foster lifelong learning, also to prepare participatory citizenship, peace, and sustainable development elements within the learners through the teaching and learning process. But we also said that for this curriculum to achieve what we want, it must be underpinned with a set of principles and numerous of them: inclusivity, lifelong equity, gender sensitivity, respect, responsiveness, among others. Critical to this is that the teaching and learning process or the curriculum delivery is underpinned with the philosophy of Ubuntu in language is just the humaneness, which speaks of the values that as we teach whatever we're teaching, be them science, humanities, arts, the element of human should be reflected. I will again look at that in the following slides. But the general aim was to make sure that we guide the preparation of learners to appropriate roles and responsibilities in the society. What is the competence-based learning or curriculum? The Zimbabwean curriculum framework was meant to promote a competence-based approach, which is realized through learning and orientation of learners. It is the main aim was to make sure that we shift from a content-based kind of a curriculum or an examination-based kind of curriculum to a competence or outcome-oriented curriculum. So we then say that within the curriculum, competence-based learning should provide the instructional methodologies, assessment, grading, and reporting that is based on learners demonstrating what they've learned, inclusive of the knowledge, the skills, and the aptitudes we expect through the learning and teaching process. So the general goal of competence learning is to ensure that learners acquire the knowledge and skills and aptitudes that are deemed to be essential for success in school, not only during the primary and secondary school, but also the higher level education and even within the career preparation. So competence-based learning would then empower learners to focus on both master of valuable skills and the application of those skills. Now, on our perspective, what are the main features of the competence-based curriculum? Number one is it focuses on scientific approach of learning, where we are saying through the learning and teaching, learners should be exposed to research, learners should be exposed to experimentation and so on. The other feature is that the teachers also learn together with the learner, where we are saying we have moved the era whereby the teacher is the fountain of all the knowledge and everyone else is the end. In this case, we also believe that learners have more knowledge which the teacher can also learn for best curriculum delivery. It also emphasizes on the 21st century skills, creativity, innovation, technological, among others. Inclusive learning, which I'll continue to refer to, and I'll be looking at the assessment model that we've used later. Then continuous assessment, again, I'll look at it to say, what is it we are referring to continuous assessment and how have we done it in our situation as Zimbabwe? Then the other feature is hands-on learning for learners. We are saying, let the learner be practical, let the learner date their hands, let the learner experiment, let the learner be involved so that we avoid passive learning during the teaching and learning process. And lastly, we have what we call the learner exit profile. This is a key to us because it guides assessment, as we shall see later. But just to explain, what is it that we're referring to as the learner exit profile? When we're talking of the learner exit profile, we're simply referring to what is it that the system will give to the learner when the learner leaves the school system at any point. Learners can leave school at any point due to of reasons. They can leave school at junior school, at prime, at grade 2, at secondary. But the question that we always reflect as the education system is to say, what have we given those learners so that they will live a happy and fulfilling life in the real world of work and life? So among the package, which we said the learner exit profile, we have skills, critical skills, problem solving skills, leadership, communication, and enterprise skills. We also have we also want our learners to live with a full understanding of national identity. Who are they within the context of their country? So, for example, within the context of Zimbabwe, who are they as Zimbabweans? Who are they again as Zimbabweans in Africa? And who are they as Africans within global family? So we look at issues like patriotism, volunteering, of national values and symbols, and also our heritage, which also reminds us that the curriculum is also heritage-based. We also expect that our learners will have a package of knowledge, variety of knowledge systems, basically that is reading and writing, also financial literacies, enterprise literacies, and a lot of the literacies that we have that are coming up. We think that when the learner exits the school system, they should have a good knowledge that will help them to live a happy and successful life. Then attitudes and dispositions, self-managing, that learners, when they exit the school at any point, they should be able to manage themselves, to be self-initiative, the ability to plan, among others. And then values, where the philosophy anchors the values of respect, discipline, integrity, and the honesty. But on the values, we should also just to give you as information that we know that the value of the philosophy of Ubuntu that I've referred earlier on is the key to what we refer as values. But we do have 4 pillars that supports it. One is we expect that when our learners leave the school system, they'll be able to have what we call self-respect. They should also be able to respect others. That is recognition that their happiness, their success is defined because of people who surround them. So they should be able to respect them. And by doing that, they cannot think of hating them, stealing from them, and all other bad things. And also respect of the environment, that the environment is meant for them. So we expect learners, when they exit the school system, they will be in the environment where there is vegetation, there are rivers, there are soil, and all other aspects of the environment. They should be able to say, this is to save us, and we should respect them. And lastly, respect of property, to say when learners exit the school system, they should know that property is meant to save them, so they should respect them. So the question is, how then do we assess all these things? This will bring us to our model, the model that we've used for assessment. So after developing the competence-based curriculum, we then developed what we call the competence-based assessment framework. And after developing it, of course, we pilot tested it. We trained the practicing teachers and the school heads on the assessment modalities. But the most important thing is to note that within that assessment framework, there are key things that, like another assessment form, we said should be reflected. We all know of the assessment for learning, assessment as learning, assessment of learning. Of course, we capture that in our assessment framework, but the key is to say the assessment, is it valid? So looking at the key aspects of a good assessment framework, that it should be valid, that's validity. Is it measuring the right competencies and skills in the right way at the right time? So that explained to us validity. So we looked at that in our framework to say, is it really valid? So the pilot testing helped us to answer some of these questions. Is it reliable? Is it assessment producing results that are meaningful and accurate? Is it fair? and impact on teaching? Is the assessment fair and biased and does it promote good teaching? And lastly, practicability. Is it practicable within the available resources and within the time constraints we have? But we didn't forget the aspect that whatever assessment model we will be using, the element of inclusivity should be clear to say the assessment framework should accommodate diverse needs of different learners in terms of talents, in terms of gender, in terms of disability, in terms of economic vulnerability. Then how are learners assessed in Zimbabwe? We have what we call the assessment is holistic with three key assessment elements, and each assessment element with a specific purpose. So what are these key three assessment elements? Number one, one of the key assessment elements is what they've called the continuous assessment learning activity, short-term CALA. So I'll be referring to this as CALA. I can see that Jacqueline's hand is up. Just allow me to go through.
Mr.
Okay.
Blessing, sorry, I just wanted to remind you that you need to speed up so that we don't cut you too short too early.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Okay, so we do have the continuous assessment learning activity, the CALA. What is it, the CALA? This is a learning activity or assessment that require learners to perform, demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. And when they are doing that, then the teacher will be recorded continuously. A continuous assessment learning activity uses a tangible product or a performance that serves as evidence of learning. And a continuous assessment learning activity presents a situation that calls for learners to apply their learning in context. It may also include project-based learning, which involve learners working for extended periods of time, investigating and responding to questions, problems, and challenges. So the continuous learning assessment activities is developed by the teacher, is the one who developed the continuous learning assessment activity. How are learners assessed for competence-based curriculum? The second pillar is the learner profiles. Learner profiling in our situation, the curriculum framework for primary and secondary education that we developed describes as a way of detailed assessment of a learner traits, discipline, values, attitude, skills, knowledge, and abilities, which are acquired from the day the learner enters the school system until when the day exits the school system. So we open a profile card and we begin to record that the day one the learner enters the school system. So wherever the learner goes, the profile card follows that learner. If a learner changes from infant school to junior school, it follows. If the learner changes from junior to secondary, the profile card follows. The sending school will remain with the record and give the summary to the receiving school. And the third way we include in our assessment framework is the summative, which provides examinations, summative examinations, which we all know. And the diagram that I'm showing here simply shows how it is related if it is a assessment for a particular subject or learning area, where we are saying then for certification, we add the marks recorded during the continuous learning area activity, which I called CALA, plus the summative mark to give us a mark that will then appear on the final certificate, which is issued by our examination branch, Zimbabwe Schools Examination Council. But while we have that model going on, profiling will still continue, and at the end of a school level, the learner will be given a profile certificate. The profile certificate will be given by the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. So by the end of the school, the learner has two certificates, the one from the assessment board and the one from the ministry, which will be used concurrently. I will not take much to give you the rationale for the paradigm shift because of time, but let me just look at one of the questions that are usually arise on will teachers be objective when rewarding marks on continuous assessment, particularly on the what I have referred to as color. Of course, there are always loopholes, but we've tried to close the loopholes through a number of activities. Number one, depending on teacher professionalism, that once teachers are trained on professionalism and professional standards, it will be difficult for them to cheat because it's outside what is expected of them as professionals. But besides that, we've also brought in quality control measures, which starts from the school level. When the teacher develops the continuous learning activity, it goes through a panel, probably of the department, which then verifies to say, is it within the standards which are set by Zimbabwe Schools Examination Council? And from there, the same activities will go also be supervised by the cluster officials. And outside those, then we have the district, provincial, and national supervisors, which will come from two different departments. The other supervisors will be coming from the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, and other supervisors will be coming from the assessment body, which is the Zimbabwe Examination Council. All will be monitoring on the quality development of the continuous assessment learning activities. Then we also have in our continuous assessment, we've also included what we call certification at the point of readiness and the trade testing. We think that the school should not wait until the learner exits school so that he is tested or certified on areas she or he is competent. So because of that, we've said that the school should identify accrediting agencies or certifying boards to trade test learners who excel in particular competencies. For example, we cannot wait for the learner to the end of the school for us to test whether he's a good volleyball coach. If we've realized that the learner is a good volleyball coach, or his skills in pottery, or his skills in cake making or baking, or in first aid or driving, the learner should be sent for trade testing and be accredited, be given a certificate. In the event that the learner leaves the school at any point, at least that learner is something to show to help him to face the real world of work and the challenges that are there. What are our major scores? Number one score is that we've developed the assessment framework for the competence-based curriculum, which we are implementing. We also have a huge human resource, particularly the teachers, to use who can help in the implementation of the assessment framework and the development of the color. Also, we have the key and the tight, watertight supervision structures from the school level up to the national level. We also have the government support to support the development of the continuous assessment framework, training, and also pilot testing. Government was supporting that. And lastly, the teacher training institutions are currently harmonizing their curriculum to the competence-based curriculum that we have developed, so that they also produce teachers who already know issues of competence-based curriculum, so that when they're in the field, it becomes easy. And the challenge is like any other new kid on the block, the CBC, the continuous-based assessment framework, we also had some challenges. One of the major challenges was that the currently practicing teachers were never trained on the CBC. So it means that it's something that they're learning when they're on the field. And the only way to update them on that is to do in-service training. And the in-service training, because of the numbers of the teachers that we have, we have been using the cascading model, and we all know the weakness of the cascading model. Secondly, time we used to train the teachers across the country was a bit limited. And as a result, while we are implementing it, we know for sure that there could be some gaps of teachers who are still struggling to understand not only the assessment framework, but even the competence-based curriculum in terms of what are they supposed to do and how are they supposed to do it. Having said this, ladies and gentlemen, and all colleagues, I end my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blessing. I can see you're very passionate about education, and that's why I raised my hand earlier, but I think it was good to give you that time to run through. So colleagues, we have an opportunity for questions, and already we had 3 questions. As we look at the other 2, I think, Blessing, there was a direct question to you in terms of the Zimbabwe experience. And the question was from Sekeleke. She's asking, can you please expound how you view or describe a learner-centered approach in Zimbabwe? This is particularly directed to the Zimbabwe experience. So if you could quickly just take a second to answer that question.
In Zimbabwe, what we've done in terms of learner-centered approach is we've come up with the strategies whereby the learner is the main focus during the teaching and learning process. So the learning activities surrounds on the learner participating rather than on the teacher participating. So the role of the teacher during the teaching and learning process is facilitating the learning process, not whereby the teacher is giving directions, is giving information. The idea is let the learner source for the information. Let the learner discover by herself. So they do experiments, they do research, they do portfolios, and during that journey, the teacher is guiding, the teacher is facilitating teaching and learning process. So it's unlike the previous regime whereby the teacher will be the fountain of knowledge, is the one telling the learners what they should know and what they should not know. And meanwhile, the teacher is assuming that learners do not have anything to share or to teach even the teacher who is guiding them.
Thank you very much, Blessing, and we shall continue the discussion. There are 2 other questions that were raised, so let me just raise them up because they were put in the chat. Bridget did ask, how do we ensure written continuous assessment is effectively implemented? And Joyce from Uganda had asked, what components would you consider or would we consider important in an assessment rubric? And participants, these questions are not necessarily for the presenters. And I would like, particularly on this question of the assessment rubric, if I can have any one of us probably just raise their hand to be able to answer before we come in. Anybody would give us what would be the components of an assessment rubric? Anybody from the assessment centers who probably would have a good idea so that they can expound for us? Okay, let me just to try. Somebody was going to speak, yes?
No, I was trying, but I think let participant be the one to answer. Maybe I will answer that one in my presentation.
Yes, I have 2. I have Betty and Caroline. Let me give Betty first, and then Caroline comes in. Gertrude, we are asking the participants to answer. So kindly, Betty from Uganda, and then Caroline.
Thank you so much. I'm in a bit of a noisy place. I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Yes, I want to respond to the issue of a rubric. For me, a rubric is something that you give to the learners so that they know the expectations from you, the lecturer or the teacher, for that matter. And so it has the criteria that you are assessing that you're interested in, and it has the indicators. And so, for example, on column 1, you list out the different components that you want to assess. And then you have like 2 or 3 more columns that describe the levels of assessment, the level of performance rather, that you want the learners to reach. And it must describe it in very, very clear terms so that the learners know that if they have to perform to excellent, for example, then whatever they're doing should be reading certain things that are very clear. If it's good, so normally for me, when I do a rubric, that's how I do it. I have my criterion very clear, and I have my rating scales very clear, and the descriptor also indicated there, so that the learners actually know my expectations. Thank you.
Great. So the emphasis actually is on ensuring that we are taking the learner abilities into consideration. Caroline, were you speaking on the same question, or you are taking the question on the ensuring continuous assessment is effectively implemented? Which are you picking?
Thank you very much. I want to talk about the rubric, but I can also, I think Professor Zati has answered that one similarly, because maybe what I would add to her explanation without repeating would be to put a comment area for general comment, if that rubric is to be shared back to the student, because it specifies the competences and then the levels of performance at which you expect a student to score A or to score 1, 2, 3, or 5. If there is a scale. If you are to get 5 in this question, you should perform to this level. And if you are to get 1, the student should have performed at this level. So it eliminates bias. And someone is really very objective in assigning. So the student knows that I got 3 because I did this well, but I left out this. But then I think if the student is to be given that rubric where you've assessed, there would be a comment, a general comment of why that student is performing like that. To continuous assessment, ensuring that continuous assessment is effective. It's been drama here in Uganda, but using an experience. If someone is to make assessment which is continuous effective, it requires still to be definite in your expectations. What do I want the student to demonstrate at level A, level B, level C? For example, if you are to use a portfolio, from what Dr. Nambiru was saying, starting with the formative assessment, you need to be very clear at what time the student is supposed to submit item this. And the student should be followed in terms of time. If I say that an entry will be made to the portfolio in week 2 of the semester, that student should be able to enter that item, and the lecturer should be able to know that every student has entered the item. And if you haven't, then the lecturer has to follow up and say, I want to know if it's an e-portfolio, whether there is anybody having a problem. Making it assessment is being definite with dates and definite with marking, and trying to make sure that the student is also, since it is for improving learning, that a student who is struggling is supported to improve along the way. So you have to generate the data. As you collect the data for each of the students, you put it down and you use the data also to improve the student learning. That if the student is failing number this, I need to use it to improve their learning, and maybe also invite forums for them to discuss and improve. So my way is like, let it be definite and let it be followed by the person who is assessing, and capture data on a given continuum. And after that, give feedback within the process so that it is really helping the student to learn and be better. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. That was really elaborate. And so, colleagues, we can continue this discussion on our co-panel as we have been doing before. We need to go to our last presentation, and I know we have eaten in quite a bit of time, but you'll agree with me. the discussion has been quite good. We've learned a lot. So we want to usher in Maurice, who is going to take us through a brief session of developing a lesson plan. Maurice, you'll need to manage your time. We've eaten quite a bit of your time. We are at 4 p.m., so probably some 55 minutes instead of the 65. Please take over.
Thank you, Catherine. I was talking to somebody. Yeah, Jacqueline. No, I will adjust. So I will finish on time.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate the discussions and the contributions from our colleagues. Really, it was very rich, and I will also base some of my discussions on what they said, especially the presentation from Zimbabwe. Okay, I hope all of you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can see it, Maurice. It's clear.
Okay, wonderful. So my presentation will be based on 3 objectives. The first one will be to establish that relationship between the curriculum component for constructive alignment purposes. Remember from webinar 1, we spoke about all the ingredients that we need in order to come up with a quality competency-based curriculum. So today we are going to see how we can utilize some of those in a practical sense, because that was one of the requests from the participants. The second one, we'll see how to create those components from the curriculum. And lastly, I will talk quickly about how to create a lesson using in a competency-based learning environment. Of course, the way we are going to proceed in this presentation, it will be participatory. So I will be asking questions for participants to contribute, to add their views, even to argue what I said or to correct me. So this is really a good opportunity for such exchange. So here I'm putting something that all of us, we know how in how life things works. One professor, very a renowned professor from Harvard University, Eric Mazur, he said that just as you can't become a marathon runner by watching marathons on TV, likewise for science, you have to go through the thought processes of doing science and not just watch your instructor do it. So this is the aspect of active learning that is very important, and give the students the opportunity to think outside the box and to use their own experience using a learner-centered approach. So something else very critically said, you cannot forget fact but you can forget facts, but you cannot forget understanding. And we know that CBC is really focusing a lot in helping students to understand topics at hand and how to use that new knowledge to create knowledge that may help them to resolve problems. So I like to do this because this graphic, which is a mind map, give us an idea of everything that we discussed so far. So today we are going to focus on constructive alignment in order to implement competency-based curriculum, where we take cognizance of competencies with the attribute, the learning objectives, the concept themselves, the skills that are part of the content that the teacher is going to teach, providing formative assessment to help students interact with the content, and later on to implement a summative assessment for to help students to provide evidence that they have developed or they have acquired the set competencies. So Blessing from Zimbabwe explained very well the assessment framework, the different aspects that comes in, and he also shared the challenges that really were very helping to understand what is happening first in Zimbabwe and what people should now look at it in order to address those challenges. So this is the model, the approach that we are going to use today in order to come up with a practical, I don't want to call it a prototype, but a practical example on how we can implement in the classroom a competency-based curriculum to help students achieve what we are saying that learners are facing as challenges using the traditional way of teaching today. We are going to use this scenario, okay? So this is something that basically is taught in a grade 5. So this is content related to 11-year-old Lena. Here we are saying Lena who started grade 1 at the age of 6. So this may change from countries to countries. So the idea here is we want the content that you are going to discuss today that will help us to build that constructive alignment. We want the concept of fractions to support students to identify the whole and the part of the whole of an object. And they would like also students to be able to express the parts of the whole from a fractional expression into decimal numbers and also in percentages. Why this is important? Because the skills that students are going to build from this lesson that you are going to build will help them to also to excel in other mathematical concepts that they will learn at the later stage. When you talk about equation, a student will get difficulties to understand the concept of equation of first degree if that learner didn't understand the concept of fractions. Because you'll get, for example, 2x equal 5, x equal 5 over 2. So a student should be having that conceptual understanding of this this model, this content that we are going to teach our students. I have a question to ask. I would like to find out why this content is at that level. Why do we really want students to develop this kind of skills, the kind of competence? We are going to see how to build it out of this content. Who can really tell me why at this level we want students to develop this kind of skills? Why does it matter to spend time, energy to help students to understand this at that level? Who can help with some reasons why? Why fractions coupled to decimal numbers and percentages at that level? Any want to try? Okay, let me give you my reason and you will give more reasons.
Let me
there is
try.
a hand. Huh? I can't see a hand. Yeah. Help me if there is a hand.
Let me try.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. Like you are just highlighting or hinting. These concepts, your hint is that there are concepts that are at the higher level, for example, at the university or when you are dealing with those equations. But there are basic concepts which you should start with, which we are going to build upon. If they are not there, then you are not going to be able to build upon them when you are going higher. Okay. These are basic concepts along the foundations of mathematics.
Wonderful. So here you mean that students need this information, this skill in order to be competent for other concepts that they are going to learn in the future. I agree with you. But there is another concept that I would like to bring in here that provides the reasons why this at this level. Remember what we said in webinar 1, we have planning session when we are developing either a new curriculum or we are reviewing the curriculum. So the reason may that fractions, the basics of fractions that are linked to other skills like decimal numbers, where students may need to understand the costs that may be linked to a product, which is a whole, but people can get small parts within that wall in order to address the costs, and also the percentages that may be necessary for reporting. For example, saying 20% of this was not of good quality because of this. So this may be another reason. Another reason also may be what the participants said, to help students to develop prior knowledge in order to be competent to other concepts that they will learn in the future. So I want to share with you quickly about the facts about competencies and the attributes to ensure that we start really at a very strong foundation and to make sure that we are on the same page. According to Sean Dons, many schools are turning to competency-based learning to help students make the most of their education and prepare them for success in tertiary education, career, and life. So this is what he's saying about competencies as a model for learning. Again, competency-based learning is facilitated around competencies. So this is very important. So if we miss to define, to set correct competencies, everything will go wrong, okay? The educational shift to skills over content, mastery over seat time spent at school, target over tasks require us as educators also to review the methods that we are using to teach our students, to assess our students, even the way we are thinking that learners should actually invest time in the learning process. Competence recognizes perspective. So this is from the student part, and this is very important for transformative learning. We want, when students get the information, not only to understand that information, that new knowledge, but you want students to process that information in their own context so that it becomes relevant. So you realize that many times when we teach our students, we talk about the what and the how, we forget the why. And you realize also sometimes when students ask why, sometimes this makes the teachers to be very nervous. Competencies have within them learning objectives. So these are the attributes, and this instills learners to acquire the desired knowledge, use those knowledge, for example, to solve given problems and to communicate new ideas and other things they can do with those knowledge, the abilities to do things in order to acquire that competence. Now, I'm presenting here just an example of a competence. Okay, so we put it in a specific format that makes sense in a specific context. We want students to be able to utilize the language of fraction to communicate ideas and the mathematical solutions to given problems. So we want also students to be able to communicate the solutions from those from the problems that they results, and to see how what they came up with a solution can help them to develop what we call informed decisions and in order to implement things. So what I'm trying to say here is this. We need to come up with a method that will help students to make sure that whatever they are learning, they can put it in the context, and the knowledge that is covered by that will help students to use it in many different ways to solve problems that they have at hand or to communicate a solution that they developed. So the area of this competence, the way I craft it, is a problem solving. But when you look at it, maybe there may be another different competence area for this one. The description is to work out solutions to given problems. The statement of this competence is to recognize the parts that make the whole for distribution or manipulation purposes. It's also to communicate clearly those parts for distribution and manipulation purposes. Look at other ways of expressing the whole or part of the whole for reporting purposes and usage in other domains of learning. It may be science, business, statistics. So this is my statement of my competence. And from the statement now, I want to extract the learning objectives. So I'm saying this, the learning objectives for this competence, I want students to recognize the whole and the part of the whole of a given object for distribution and manipulation purposes, use the fraction expression to communicate about the part of the whole for distribution or manipulation purposes, to convert the fractional expression into decimal numbers and percentages for reporting purposes or usage in other domain of learning, science, business, statistics for research, and so on. Now, I've said that, I would like from the audience just to think quickly what other competence based on the scenario of the content that we suggested we want the student to develop, what other competence you may think about this, okay? So this is more a kind of reasoning exercise. We want students to develop the computation skills on fractions, to be able to convert the fractions in other ways of expressing the information, like in decimal numbers or in percentages, or to communicate clearly about the whole of a product or small part of that product for different reasons. It can be for distributing, it can be even for commercial purposes. Now, I would like to find out, here I said that this is about problem solving. Is there another competence you can think about this example of a scenario where learners will learn something that will help them to develop the knowledge, the skills, the ability, the aptitudes, the attitude as well? Just think about, let me give you 30 seconds and just try. You don't need to come up with something very complex, just a simple thing. Which other competence do you think may come out of this?
Morris, there is in the chat an answer from Olive, communication.
Yes. Communication as a competence, communication skills, which is a huge field for the 21st century. Yes, that one is a good one. Any other one?
Awuku says collaboration. from the
Yes.
chat. Critical thinking.
Critical thinking, because there is a question about reasoning where we want students to suggest. So you will see in the questions that we suggested. So participants will think about other type of questions. No, thank you very much. So that is well noted. Now, something that I would like really to point out very quickly, and this is very important when you develop learning objectives. So the learning objective should first indicate who is going to do what. And this is very obvious. This is the learner. Now, you need in your learning objectives to focus on the performance. What is going to happen? What students should be able to do in a specific situation. That's where we define the conditions and the criteria that will help us as indicators to say, no, the student have done what was expected. So I'm not going to enter really deep in this. We are going to continue these discussions during the virtual space, where we are going to provide more resources that really work on this aspect to develop very effective and implementable learning objectives. Now, remember what I said in the short papers that we shared with you. We said that when you are done with the competence, you have defined it, you have provided its attributes, the learning outcomes, you have identified the knowledge, the abilities, attitudes, the skills, and so on. Now, the next move immediately will be now to find evidence that will ascertain that the student have developed those competencies. And this is very important when you are doing what we call backward design. Even when you are teaching, when you put the assessment that will provide the information, the evidence that you want to use as indicators the student have achieved what you wanted them to achieve, will help you now to come up with a content that will help them or will guide them to go through the process. So we have these three learning objectives that we mentioned earlier. Now, I'm proposing just, this is an example I'm giving, and you will think about other type of questions that may respond or may provide evidence to a student to show that they've acquired that competence that we defined, we established. So here I have a very simple questions at that level when we talk about pizza or cake. So our learners will identify themselves on that. So here I'm saying that there is a party in a family of 4, 2 parents and 2 children, and they are expecting 12 people. The father bought a pizza, a large pizza, but the provider, the restaurant, cut that pizza in a certain number of small pieces. Now the question is, how many pieces of the pizza the restaurant provided and what represent each part compared to the whole in fractional expression? So here, if you go back, we want students to recognize the whole and the part of the whole of a given object for distribution, manipulation, and so on, and other reasons. That is question 1.1. Question 0.12, how many pieces of the pizza are required to ensure all people in the party receive at least 1 piece? Express your answer in fractional expression. So we have 12 people plus 4 from that family, we have 16. So we need students to come up with a way to communicate about really what is happening if every person should receive a pizza, and using the language of fractions. Question number 3, express in percentage the missing pieces of the pizza to ensure equal distribution for every person, and advise the best action related to the pizza the father may take to ensure success of the party. So this one, we want to make sure that for the party to be effective, the father should propose another way. So we want Lena to come up with that proposal. So this, you can see, we are looking at reasoning aspect. Is not only the fraction or the computation, the calculation alone. We want students to go a little bit further than that. Now, I have a question to you, participants. We are saying this. Create a new question. Think about it. Use the chat or click on the link that I shared in the chat to access the Google group, where you may search your name, because we distributed the different parts in that name to ensure that you may provide your answers, you may take note and so on, that you can keep in your portfolio. Now, I would like you to put your, or to frame your question in the cognitive ability type of questions, to ascertain that learners have developed the established competence that we discussed earlier. Okay, so I provided, and I also shared the link for this presentation, the last slide number 17. You have the list of those cognitive ability tests. Okay, just think about another simple question at that level of a 11-year-old learner, a question which is in that category of cognitive ability tests. And the cognitive ability test, if I go very quickly, where we have that information, sorry, I went beyond. Just to help for you, for those who didn't yet access the document that I shared. So we have the information that may help you. For the cognitive ability test, and I shared this information in the paper that I distributed, I think yesterday or before yesterday, we have numerical reasoning. That is one cognitive ability test. We have a verbal reasoning, we have logical reasoning, okay? So think about a simple question in this category. Numerical reason linked to that competence that we are developing. Any answer in the chat? Or a hand, because I can't see the hands when I'm presenting. You got participant.
So far, not any in the chat related.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe the question is difficult or is not very clear. Okay. So here is to develop a, maybe let's say a reasoning question. And this will meet again with one of, so I have to go back to where I was. I have another question, number 4. Maybe this will help a little bit with question 3. Look at sub-question 1.3. What type of question is it representing? Number 3 saying express in percentage. So there is something that will happen to ensure equal distribution for every person and advise the best action related to the pizza the father may take to ensure success of the party. Okay. in which category this question is related. Is it a verbal reasoning? Is it a diagram that helps somebody to reason? Is it a logical reasoning type of question? Yes, who can try? Okay, for the sake of time, so you will continue thinking about that, especially question number 3. But for question number 1, this is a reasoning, a numerical reasoning type of questions, because there is this where we ask a student, Lena, to provide the best action in order to ensure that the party may be successful. We want kids to think about what the father can do in order every person who is in the party may get his piece of the pizza. Okay, so this one is a reasoning, a type of ability question or type of test. It can also be considered in the category of communication. Okay, a verbal reasoning, because we have a scenario we provided there that we want students to think about it. Okay, so now I would like us to think about the content, because here we were busy talking about the formative assessment. Now the content. We need to craft the content that speaks to the competence, speaks on the attribute of the competence. We are talking about the knowledge, skills, ability, the learning outcomes, speaks to the summative assessment that we set to ensure that this content will guide the student in the process. So things are really well aligned. So we don't just get the content from somewhere, maybe it was there in previous curriculum, or we have a textbook that is helping in that. But this will help us to go through a very strict and rigorous thought on how to get the content that will be used to support students to develop the competence. So here in blue, I provided the statement that we discussed before. So something that I would like just to let you know, and most of you really know this, is the different learning of domains, the different learning domains as it was established by Bloom, Benjamin Bloom, the father of Bloom taxonomies. So we have 3 domains: cognitive, which is more on intellectual abilities of the student, psychomotor, which is on physical, the performance, creation of the product, and so on, and the affective, which is about attitude, values. The way this aspect is very important. The attitude of people who are learning is important, because when you are a teacher, you really need, you need student or learners who are willing to learn. So this is very important to keep in our mind. We will go in details during the discussion in the virtual session, and we'll get more resources. Now, when we talk about content, here I'm providing an example of basic fraction content linked on the competency. So a fraction can be identified as a part of a whole expressed that way, A over B. A is the numerator, B is the denominator, and this is how we write fractions. So here we are providing the information. This is part of the knowledge acquisition. So the information is coming from outside the student inner. Now, we provide also other information about the naming, the way we write fractions, and so on. Now, I would like to find out from the audience, because these are the things that most of us we did in primary school. What other content based on the competence? Remember, in the competence, we have the decimal numbers, we have the percentages that the student need to develop. What other concepts that are required in this case? Who can share with me about that? You can see the questions, what we asked. So now we have to come up with a content that will help students to interact with the new concept in order for them to be competent in it. Which other concept do you think we should introduce as a content for students to be able to be successful in this?
Maurice,
case?
we have an answer from Taolane.
Okay.
Equivalent fractions.
Okay, so this is another content giving another concept related to the fractions. Thank you very much. Any other concept that is related to what we define in the competence, that the exercise or the evidence we should student to show?
We could have Olive give her answer if you allow her.
Yes, yes, of course.
So that I'm not just reading the chat. We could also hear the voices of the participants.
Yes.
Olive, your answer, please.
I was thinking you could introduce decimals.
There? Sorry,
she says decimals.
The decimals, okay.
Okay, Joyce, you have an answer, Joyce?
Yes, I have written divisions.
Okay.
Okay,
very
Caroline.
important.
Caroline, your answer, please.
I'm proposing mixed fractions.
Mixed fractions. If I may ask, why do you want mixed fraction? So it can be the same question for those who said decimals and so on. Just justify it a little bit in few words.
Yes, many are the complexity, because from a simple fraction to an improper fraction and a mixed fraction, that knowledge is important to enable the learner to work with the maybe more complex issues where, as Joyce is proposing, where divisions are concerned, where multiplication is concerned, is that fractions are not always parts, but they involve wholes, and at the same time they can have, you can have wholes, but at the same time have portions of the whole, so that the idea of understanding a fraction is expanded beyond saying the fraction is part of a whole.
Wonderful.
But in working with knowledge and the real world, the fraction has much more to do with working with a number of bigger numbers of which you can divide, and somebody will get a whole at one time, and then maybe at another time get parts of the same whole. So a whole can also be a fraction of a larger whole, if I could say that.
Wonderful. So why I brought this here is to introduce that backward design. You have the competence, you have the learning objectives, you set already the questions that will provide evidence that students have acquired the competence. Now you start looking at the content that will make this happening. So this is very powerful. And this is the beauty of this model of competency-based learning. And most of the time, we are failing to come up with really a proper way of supporting students developing the competence, because we just look at the traditional model, which is more on content. We're just thinking about the content. A little bit, we look at the learning objectives, and the assessment will come at the later stage. And this will create a lot of problems and dysfunctionment in order for our students to perform. Now, thank you very much for the contribution. Teaching modalities, and you'll see in the resource that we shared with you, where we spoke about unpacking the constructive learning, we added the concept of instructional framework. This one is very, very important. First, you need to identify, and we did it already, what students should be able to do. All these things are already in the competence. We have even indicators that will help us to find out if the students have developed those competencies, those skills that we defined already. We have already the content that is 100% aligned to the competence, to the learning outcomes, even to the summative assessment that we want our students to use in order to demonstrate. Now, another very important question. So how can we teach? How can we, these days we like to use the words or the tools, how can we facilitate learning? Because normally we should be facilitators, and we had this about in the presentation and the interventions from our colleagues who spoke about rubrics and so on. So it's very critical to find out how can we teach, how can we facilitate learning in order to help students to develop these skills. Here I'm suggesting a few things, and I would like to find from you what else we may, other methods we may use. What teaching strategy, methods, techniques, instructional skills, things that we defined already to guide learners to acquire the competence. For this competence that we define in this example, the following teaching modalities can be considered. Lecture through demonstration, which is a direct instruction. Direct instruction, this is a strategy that I'm going to use to demonstrate to my students through a little bit of teaching. Group work, I want students, the little they know from fraction they did in grade 3 in some curriculums, to use that information they have. Maybe I gave them access to the content already. They can go together, they can think about. I gave them a question that I would like them to work out. Now, another question, colleagues, that I would like to learn from you, because I'm learning a lot from you. What are the teaching modalities? So here I say modalities. I don't really to say teaching method or teaching strategies. You will find out what you want to express that may be adapted for this content and the competence to be achieved. So I will correct this. For the competence to be achieved. With other teaching methods, teaching strategies you may employ, teaching techniques to address what we have already in the concept that you want students to develop. Maybe we have noticed that they don't understand one thing, would like them to understand. Who can help with answering to this question? Jacqueline, help me with the chat, or somebody raising the hands. Anything? Related to fractions, percentages?
I don't see anybody with a hand up, but Caroline, you'd like to probably just give your sentiments? Caroline, if you can hear us.
Yes. I do hear you.
Okay.
I have proposed the use of projects. I see that there are several projects Alana can do in regard to fractions. which are to do with sharing out things within the real community of where they stay. And then the learners are given a simple project to work out and show how a piece of land, for example, a father can give. Land is very important in Uganda and Uganda, so I'm using that, how a father can petition and give land to their children. Yes. And then they can really use the mathematics to come up and say this land, this acreage. And so if it is to be partitioned, the process would be this, and then they give us what activities they will do, and then they come up with the percentages in either percentage or using decimals, or also representing the answers with using maybe mixed fractions, whatever the teacher would love. I also thought about museums, what we call the virtual museums, where students individually collect information in the real world, and then they post events or projects they've done with the pictures, and they put it in an area which the teacher has provided, and they talk about what they did or what they collected from outside, but it is put for others to watch and see regarding sharing out things and fraction in using the knowledge of fractions that they have been taught. Then the other method I proposed was task-based learning. A lot of task-based learning is seen in here, where learners can work in small groups, but with them definitely for practice. If you want them to practice, then you will set a lot of activities that can put them into either reasoning or problem solving, and they are working either in pairs or in small groups. Thank you.
I'm very happy. Who was speaking? Is Joyce or Caroline? I think it's Caroline.
Yeah, this is Caroline.
Caroline, okay. Now I start remembering the voices. Yeah, no, thank you very much for the well-elaborated answers on this. And I would like also in the resource, not the resource pack, but this the 5-pager document I shared with you. I spoke about learning pyramids, showing the importance in terms of the method we are using in our class that helps students. Okay, so this is something else that we need to start thinking about, and we are going to go through in more thinking about it. And you remember that the best way of learning is to teach. How can we use students to demonstrate to other students, which really will help them to reach up to 90% of efficiency in terms of learning. So formative assessment, this is the key for success of competency-based learning, because we are saying this, and the research has proved it, that assessment is the one driving learning, not the other way around. Learning doesn't drive assessment, but assessment is driving learning. So we should really give a very high importance when it comes to formative assessment. The assessment for learning, or the assessment as learning, as Blessing explained in his presentation. Okay, so here I gave an example, which is a quiz. So I removed some part of the pizza. So I asked students to look at it, to do calculations, and to tell us in terms of percentage, the missing parts. Okay, so this is an example of formative assessment. So I'm giving you an example, but the time now is gone. To think about another type of formative assessment that may enhance learning of fractions, decimal numbers, and percentage. Just a quick colleague who can talk about another type, just quickly. Because I know Caroline spoke about some of the task-based and so on. Yeah, think about a formative assessment activity that may help students to develop or to enhance, to master what we decided when we structured our competence for students to be able to achieve. Jacqueline, you help if there is any hand or any?
Checking, I haven't seen any yet.
Anything yet, huh?
Yes.
Colleagues, another type of question, which is not a quiz, but something for formative assessment. I like the idea of self-assessment, but that one is from the student initiative. They can assess themselves for peer assessment. Okay, time is going. So let me put this in the parking lot. These are the things that we are going to continue discussing during our discussion through the virtual platform. Okay, so these are the cognitive abilities. And remember, we have this in the paper that I call different types of assessment. So you will see something that is there, and we'll continue the discussion about it. And I planned to talk about now how to deliver our lessons. And we don't have really enough time to talk about it, but let me just, in few words, what we should do. First, to deliver a lesson. So here we have all the ingredients. The competence, the attribute within it, the concepts, skills that constitute the content. We have the teaching modalities and the formative assessment that we are going to use. Now it's time now to take the student through the process of learning. The first thing to do is to develop a lesson plan. That is critical. You can't escape it, because that plan will help to define very important things that we are going to continue discussing. What the teacher will be doing during a specific time, what the learner will be doing, and the BOPS methodology that I introduced during one of the papers that I shared with you, the bridging, the learning objective, the pre-evaluation or pre-assessment, the participatory learning, the post-assessment, and the summary. If you look at that, we can do all those 6 elements in the delivery, in the facilitation process. Okay, colleagues, we don't have much time. We have 5 minutes remaining. Maybe let me stop here. If there is a very burning issue, Jacqueline, somebody may ask the question. Maybe we should give an opportunity to the participant also to go through the post-evaluation of today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. And yes, I know RISPA is, Yvonne is really keen on us to take the survey. Yvonne has posted the survey on the chat, but just before I give Yvonne a chance, please let me ask, Anne Gatia had put a suggestion on the chat. Anne, would you just like to give us a little insight on the suggestion you have given on the chat, please? Then we can hand over to Yvonne so that we at least hear your voice.
Okay, thank you, Jacqueline. I was just trying to give a response to what Maurice asked about another way we could assess fractions. And I was thinking that you have a budget, maybe within the home or within the classroom, and you have to buy many items. So you have to make decisions in terms of how much do you spend for each item. And then you can now begin to look at the percentage for each, the percentage of money spent for each item. That could look like a fraction of the money that you have and the amount that you spend on each item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. That's a good insight for us. And yes, a good wrap up at the end of the long discussion we have had. Thank you very much, participants. for the great engagement you have made in the chat. You've kept us on toes to try and check what you're doing. And so let's continue the discussion on Copano. I pick a very critical issue that has been raised. There is a question about our using outcomes and objectives interchangeably. And yes, we can easily confuse ourselves, as participants have indicated. So as we get to Copano, let's be able to unpack. When do we refer to objectives? When do we refer to outcomes? And basically, what is the difference between the two? Otherwise, I want to thank everyone. And at this point, Yvonne, please allow me to hand over to you. Even though you've put the prompt on the chat, kindly just take us through again on the issue of the survey and then wind up the session for today for us. Thank you very much, everyone. Yvonne, to you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, everyone. Please allow me not to use my video. I'm trying to save on bandwidth. My connection is not very good. So I've put a survey link on the chat. We are just requesting you to take 5 minutes of your time just to fill up the survey so that it will help us also to know our way forward. The surveys have been very helpful, and mostly that is what we use to determine what else to bring to you. We are here to support countries, and please, we need to be able to bring learning that is important and useful to you. So we are asking you to be honest with us and just tell us what else do you need from KICS, what else do you need as far as teacher development is concerned, teaching and learning, and also assessment. We are also asking you just to give us feedback on today's session. What have you learned today? And most importantly, it's not just a matter of learning, it's also how are you going to use this information in your own country when it comes to maybe your policy discussions and practices. So please take just 5 minutes to go through. Thank you, Gabriel. I assume you're the one sharing. So yes, this is the feedback that we got from webinar 2. You asked for more nutrients on implementation of CBC. You asked for effective means of supporting teachers on assessment. And you also asked for a step-by-step development of a topic in CBC to see the alignment which many usually miss. So the discussions today have been very engaging. As an educationist myself, I appreciate the discussions today. I've learned a lot. And like Jacqueline says and Maurice, we need to continue this discussion on Copano. Thank you. I've seen people are very active on Copano. Thank you very much. And let us continue discussing so that we'll be able to improve our own curriculum. And for that, let me get you back to Gabriel, my colleague Gabriel, to officially close for us. Please just take 5 minutes of your time and take the survey. It will help us on knowing the way forward. Thank you. Gabriel, back to you.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Thanks so much, Yvonne. And yeah, as Yvonne mentioned, thank you all for your engagement and participation today. We've had some fantastic and illuminating conversations. I'd also like to share appreciation and gratitude with the African Curriculum Association team for making today such a successful community of practice, despite some of the challenges that have been there. We recognize and appreciate the great efforts to facilitate an excellent exchange of knowledge, regional innovations, and group practices. Next Thursday, we will be wrapping up our sessions on the realities of competency-based curriculum and education, concluding with a session on monitoring and evaluation. And as we move forward to that date, we will share resources, webinar resources, and video recordings with participants. And yeah, once again, thanks so much. And I don't know if my colleagues have anything else to add. Otherwise, I think we may be able to wrap up.
Probably we could have Marianne just say a word or two.
Is Marianne here?
No, Marianne is still in the other meeting. Marianne will not be able to join. Neither is Victoria. They are both in another meeting. Enoch is here. Enoch.
I'm here, yes, but they are still in the other meeting. Yes.
Okay. So I think,
yeah, Jacqueline,
Gabriel,
maybe,
you'll just guide
yeah.
us. Yeah.
Jacqueline, just to remind people to keep watching what is happening on Copano. Now I'm going to focus on how to support them to use it fully. The last 2 weeks we were busy with the content, putting in place different strategies on how to engage the participant and so on. So now we are going to look at the technology parts, what they can do, how they can create a page, how they can contribute in the page, not to comment only, but how they can add their own contents, how they can come up with a portfolio for themselves, and at the later stage, how they can share the contents we developed in this project with other colleagues in the countries, in the ministries, even the teachers across the countries where they come from. So we are going to develop more contents for the next 2 weeks and supporting the group on how to utilize the technology fully. Here we are talking about the Copano. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, everyone, to the participants as well. We really appreciate the engagements we have had today. Gabriel, I don't know whether as we close down, we'll have our beautiful music that we always do. Now that we've made ourselves get used to it, so kindly do us the honors as the members, the participants continue filling the survey.
Will do. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Great.
Hi Congo mane, hi Congo chelete, hi Congo mane, hi Congo chelete. Hey,